Hello and welcome back to the Watermill. We're still waiting for our building warrant to replace the roof and demolish the kiln internals. In the meantime, we've been busy continuing our work on the internal walls. This month, we've finished up the first pass of steam cleaning on the main areas of the mill. We have removed most of the surface mortar from the internal walls, but still have a few weeks left of work on that. We've also continued to stabilize the floors with more props and more plywood covering up the missing floorboards. Just steam cleaning all the walls makes a big difference, as we saw in last month's update. Removing the mortar makes it feel a lot darker in the mill as there is far less light bouncing around, but it is a really important step for the restoration. At the beginning of the month, we also received our scaffolding delivery, which also came with the slates. We now have all the slates we need for the roof and the scaffolding to access the roof and all the walls so we can work on the outside of the building once we have permission. This month, we also submitted a new listed building consent application to request permission to repoint the internal walls, rip up the rotten floorboards, repair or replace the floor beams, temporarily use plywood sheets for flooring, and temporarily reclad the grain hoist in OSB to make it weathertight. Repointing the internal walls will take a lot of labour, and we're still working on our main planning application for the conversion. Repointing will give us something to do if we manage to finish the roof and kiln work before we have the second building warrant for the restoration. Clearing the mortar off the walls is very slow going. Some of the stone that has sat wet for decades behind the non-permeable finishes is fragile, so we can't just go blasting in with power tools to rip it off. On some area of the walls, we have a mix of lime mortar, modern plaster, oil-based paints, and vinyl paints all in one area. We might only manage a square meter in a day. We've also removed most of the cement from the internal walls. The council told us this does not require listed building consent, and removing any modern finishes that are harming the building is highly approved of by them. This work does require the use of power tools. If we just used a hammer and chisel to remove the cement, we might only manage a square metre a week, if that. We're using 2 different weights of SDS drill with a chisel mounted to try and knock the cement off the walls. First, we try to vibrate the cement in a wide area to encourage it to fracture, or at least start to separate from the stone. Then coming in from the side, we can usually knock it free. In areas where the cement has been used to bed stones together, it's a bit of a different story. It's very slow going. After everything gets covered in cement dust, it's hard to distinguish the cement from the stone, so we have to be very careful. Luckily, the cement is fairly old, brittle, and has lots of sand in it, which makes it break before we can damage the stone. Propping up the Watermill end of the top floor was particularly challenging. I screwed some timbers to the top and bottom of the props to give them something to push on. The timbers around the millstones are pretty much non-existent. What is there brushes away with a broom. This area has been exposed to water blowing in through multiple windows, as well as the leak in the roof above, for almost 20 years, and therefore has the most decayed timber. Luckily, there is a lip of stone we can set the props on, as the walls are slightly thicker on the ground floor. This, of course, meant standing precariously on a tiny bit of stone lip as I placed and did up the props. It's very awkward putting the amount of force you need to raise the floor onto the prop while it's right next to a wall from such an unsafe position. We also covered the grain hoist opening on the top floor. I didn't get time to do this in December when I covered the middle floor opening. It seemed to be fine as it's pretty much weather sealed and only a bit of wind comes through. But we keep getting starlings and swallows coming into the top floor and they can get trapped in there at times, so it was time to cover up their last ingress point. We still have a kiln full of birds, but there's not much we can do about that just yet. Prior to our live stream for the National Mills weekend, we cleared all the remaining junk and debris from the ground floor. We then steam cleaned the floors and the machinery room on the ground floor, which came up fairly nicely. What we found really interesting was that the walls could now deal with the moisture as they should. We had a lot of condensation on the flagstone floor for a couple of days, but the building dried out as fast as it would when we first started, despite not having the dehumidifiers. The non-permeable surface finishes being removed from the walls allowed the stone to soak up the excess humidity. We hope soon we'll be able to do weekly updates, as a weekly video showing us hammering away at a few square meters of wall is probably a bit too dull to watch. Once we get consent and the timbers to fix the floors, plus the building warrant for the roof, we'll have much more visible progress on the mill. It's challenging for us to spend so much time on the walls and feel like there is very little to show for it. Making these videos really helps us see how much of a change it has been. It's slow going, but it's important work to set us up for the next stages of the renovation. I'd also really like to thank the person who bought us the FatMax organizer from our Amazon wishlist. It doesn't tell us who bought it as far as we can see, but it is very much appreciated. The organizer will be going into the truck to help store all the little bits and bobs scattered all over the shelves in there. I hope you enjoyed seeing what we've been up to, and we'll see you in the next video.